Now, the impact of Grenfell is still being felt across South Yorkshire as an investigation after the fire found 309 tower blocks here were also unsafe. Olivia Hill lives in one of those in Sheffield city centre. She's been waiting 4 years for work to start to remove unsafe cladding. Olivia, how's this making you feel?
It really brings to home how much we need the information that's going to come out on the report today, how much more there is to learn and how much we need to know to make all the buildings in the rest of the UK safe as a result of this.
What's the impact directly on people like yourselves who live in these buildings, given how long this is taking?
Yeah, it's had huge impacts on people's ability to sell and move and get on with their lives and continue with what they would have done without being trapped in these buildings that aren't safe.
And emotionally or mentally, how does it psychologically affect you knowing that you are in a building with unsafe cladding?
It really does affect everybody on a daily basis. You know, we've had false alarms in our building, and to hear the information from the firefighter just there that there's been no training about evacuating high-rise buildings is extra terrifying, because that's our position now. We have to evacuate and get out.
All this work that needs to be done, Olivia, who's paying for that?
So that is one thing that's happened already, that the government have been putting protections for the flat owners in place for the normal leaseholders like myself, and that those responsible should be sought out and held accountable, and hopefully this will just strengthen that position.
Well, of course you aren't on your own in feeling unsafe where you live. You did set up a residents group. Tell me about that and any difference it's made.
Absolutely. It has helped us all join together within the building. There's 112 flats, and we have a really strong group to contact and join forces against our management company, and to push and make sure that they are doing exactly what the government recommendations are. And hopefully those recommendations coming today will help.
Who do you think's directly to blame for, it taking so long to sort out in your own building?
I think there's just so much unknown, and it's a developing situation, and it needs to go through all of the steps of government. So I think it's such a difficult project to fix. You know, we do need this remediation as fast as possible to make safe homes, but it's got to be done right, and it's got to be done to a perfect standard, so this could never possibly happen again.
You mentioned before about how difficult it is to try and sell your flat. Is that something that you've looked at doing?
It hasn't affected me directly yet, but it might be doing in the near future. Having just finished at university, it could be something that I need to do soon. Have I got a job elsewhere and got to move out of Sheffield, unfortunately?
Do you feel like you're going to have issues with that?
I think it's still really tricky. Not only that the flat needs, the building needs £10 million worth of remediation. It shows how big of a project this is going to be. Like, it's going to take 2 years. It would be very difficult to sell something that is wrapped in scaffolding and seems like a building site.
How have the management company been directly with residents, Olivia?
They communicate when something big happens, but we're often in the dark for quite a long time because it's such a slow process, moving through all of their rules and regulations to get this huge project organised to even get started.
And obviously you've been living for a few years in fear. Well, I don't want to put words in your mouth, actually. Are you worried that something like Grenfell could happen in your flats as a result of this unsafe cladding?
I do worry. You can see where the cladding is, and I know where my friends live in the building, other residents, and unfortunately we've had some false alarms, and seeing the fire engines on the street and how seriously South Yorkshire Fire and Rescue take a call from our building has brought it to home multiple times.
When you say false alarms, is it somebody's fire alarm just going off because of the microwave or the shower or something?
Yeah, we've had a couple of those kind of situations. And thankfully now we do have a fire alarm that is up to standard, that we can stay in the building. It hasn't had to be shut down or closed or anything. But that wasn't the case to start with.
Well, you didn't even have a fire alarm that worked properly.
Yeah, they're not. They weren't standard, because the plan would normally be, as was the case at Grenfell, that you would stay put, that your flat should be safe enough for you to stay in there for an hour while a fire is sorted out elsewhere. But obviously we don't trust the building to do that anymore. And one of the first recommendations was that we would evacuate.
Finally, Olivia, with this report coming out today, what are your sort of hopes for the report? Obviously, it's a tragedy that cannot be rewritten, but what are your hopes for the future in terms of safety when it comes to cladding?
Yeah, it's just the information we need to know and understand more, not only how it was allowed to happen, but how we're going to stop this in the future. You know, how are we going to test building materials going forwards and prevent these deadly combinations from happening?
Olivia, thank you for your time this morning. Olivia Hill there, she's the leaseholder of a flat that still has cladding that's deemed unsafe. Now, the management company for Olivia's tower block is yet to respond, but we'll bring you that as soon as we get it. And in about an hour's time, we'll be speaking to the Sheffield South-East MP, Clive Betts, who campaigned on this issue. And listening to that and joining us on the show is Labour's Sheffield South-East MP Clive Betts. Now, he's followed the Grenfell Tower disaster very closely with his work as the former chair of the government's Housing Committee. Clive, listening to that, 4 years on, still waiting for that dangerous cladding to be removed from a Sheffield apartment block. It's not good enough, is it?
It certainly isn't, no. I mean, and yes, there's every right for people to feel worried about their safety. Many people who own flats are trapped in them because they can't sell them. People are paying enormous increases in their insurance because bills for insurance have been jacked up by companies saying the buildings aren't as safe now. All these things are affecting people 7 years after this disaster. It really isn't good enough. And if one thing happens today from the final report from the inquiry, there must be extra pressure on the new government now to get on and make sure that all these buildings are made safe.
Well, like you say, you are in government now, so you have the power to make that difference. What are you going to do to protect people living in dangerous buildings like Olivia's in Sheffield?
Well, first of all, there are a number of things that can be done. I mean, I think over the years, government could have done more from a legal point of view to help people in the situations just being described. Because many, householders, they're just ordinary people who bought a home and thought that was it. Many of them are home for the rest of their lives. And suddenly they find they've got these dangers, these safety issues, and of course into legal issues then, dealing with developers, dealing with building owners, dealing with managing companies who aren't being helpful. Many have been, many have got on and done the job, but others haven't. So when ordinary people trying to just get on with their lives and making their homes safe face all these legal challenges, I think in the past government could have done more to help them. So that's one challenge. I think government can do more now, and it depends on the recommendations from the report today, but I'm sure it will say something about this, to address the issue of products in buildings, whether they're safe or not. I'm sure one of the things that will come out of the Grenfell Inquiry is that some of the materials used in Grenfell were not in the end fit for purpose. They weren't safe. They contributed to fire. 7 years later, we have still not got a proper comprehensive clarification of products used in buildings according to their safety, and we haven't got a proper testing regime to make sure those products are safe. I think that is an absolute top priority now that needs to be done.
I think the families and friends of those that died in Grenfell will find it an insult how long it has taken. I know obviously your government were not in power when that took place. When this is published today, what are you hoping it will achieve? Will the government be able to find funding to change these claddings that need updating?
Well, there is quite a lot of funding in place now. There was a building safety fund set up by the last government, and developers have been made to contribute money towards the making of these buildings safe. So there is a lot of money around, but there may be gaps in that financing. For the highest buildings are generally covered, the ones over 18 metres. Some slightly lower buildings haven't got full packages of funding, so that's an issue that may need to be addressed. There's another big omission as well, Ellie, and that's social housing. Because some of these blocks of flats are owned by councils and housing associations up and down the country, and the last government refused to give the same financial help to those properties as they gave to private properties. Indeed, you can get a situation where in a block of flats, those properties which have been sold privately can get help with their cladding and other work, and those which are still being rented can't. Now, that is not acceptable. It's not fair, and that's an issue that I hope this government will now rectify.
We're told, Clive, that any criminal proceedings are likely to be at least 18 months away. Should there be prosecutions?
Well, I haven't seen the report yet. Nobody has, probably apart from ministers now, and I think the Grenfell survivors and families have seen copies, I understand, in advance. But I'd be very surprised if we don't get to prosecutions. I mean, people clearly made enormous mistakes, that there weren't proper rules in place, there weren't proper processes in place, there weren't proper testing arrangements for products in place. But nevertheless, so some of those are system failures and legal failures. But then undoubtedly there were individual failures, company failures as well along the way. If they're identified by the inquiry, then obviously serious consideration has to be given to prosecutions. But that will be some way down the line. And in terms of the just general response to the report, I expect the Prime Minister to announce the report today, to produce it to Parliament, but it will still take a while for a full detailed government response about what they're going to do. Obviously, you can't get a report of this magnitude one day and announce everything you're going to do with it the next. So there will be a bit of delay in that. But if people are, have been guilty of negligence or failing to take proper measures to keep the residents of Grenfell safe, then individuals and companies as well, should be held properly to account.
And lastly, Clive, we obviously heard from Olivia. I know that you followed this closely anyway. What is your message to people in South Yorkshire who are currently living in buildings that are deemed, dangerous and unsafe?
Well, I think, first of all, certainly work with your local MP. I know in Sheffield, Paul Blomfield, who was the MP for Sheffield Central, did a lot of work with his constituents over the years to talk to them, to reassure them, and of course to make links into officials in government departments. There are a lot of expert officials now in government departments who are working on these issues, know them inside out, and will help individuals like Olivia with the challenges they face. They can go and get advice from them about how to deal with the challenges when building owners, building managers refuse to accept their proper responsibilities.
Thank you. Sheffield South-East Labour MP Clive Betts there, of course, will bring you more on this report today as it comes out.